Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with Australian-based business excellence guy, Rael. After 30-plus years as a serial entrepreneur, dabbling in everything from education to finance to fitness, he has now made it his mission to share his knowledge and expertise with others, seeing the light that comes on and connections being made in people's heads as to how they can weave his experiences and advice into their businesses reinforces that this is where he needs to be in his life. In 2013, after the discovery that he had 2 blocked arteries, things changed quite drastically. He gets into all of this and so much more. Enjoy the interview.
Again, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for the show. And the first thing that I want to ask you is the last 3 years, we've gone through quite an ordeal with COVID. It's worked on all of us in very different ways. So I'm curious with you, how did you survive that time period, and how has it changed the way that you live your life and conduct business now?
Okay, thanks, Joe. That's actually a very interesting question. Prior to 2020, I was really doing keynote speaking. So flying to pretty cool, exotic places, doing a 45-minute, 1-hour talk, hopping on a plane and going somewhere else. And I was enjoying that, and I got to see cool things like, sunrise over Mount Everest and all those sorts of things. But I found during COVID, I switched my focus from big stages to small classrooms to, online 4-month business academies, small business academies. And suddenly I was getting much more fulfilled, not as well paid, but much more fulfilled because I was spending 4 months with business entrepreneurs who were growing every time I spoke to them, every time we had a session together. And over that 4-month period, I grew as a person because my facilitation skills dramatically increased. I learned a lot about being a facilitator and not a talking head on stage. So I grew as a person. I learned how to stop and listen as opposed to just letting me talk for 45 minutes and then waltz off stage and go somewhere else. I think that was the biggest change for me during COVID. I mean, we were in this weird bubble in Western Australia where we actually didn't have COVID by and large. I mean, I think we had about 3 weeks of lockdowns, but our whole state, which is half the size of Australia, was locked down. You couldn't come in or out for about a year. And so we lived a relatively normal COVID-free existence, but within our bubble.
That's interesting because, from our perspective in the States, I do remember that about Australia being in a much different place. But the government reaction around the world was vastly different than the United States. There wasn't this big dividing line. There was a unity. You didn't have all of these people saying you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. I think there was a level of calm that was imbued by good leadership around the world.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, I think it extended too long, like particularly where we are in Western Australia, the isolation of our state probably extended 2 or 3 months longer than it should have. But by and large, life was relatively normal. I mean, I spent a fortune on IT infrastructure for one of my other businesses, and my staff ended up working a total of 5 weeks from home. The rest of the time they were in the office. So, the government response here in certain places was a bit more knee-jerk reaction, but I think on a federal Australian level, it was relatively calm and I still laugh with friends that when COVID first started, no one was talking about wearing masks. They were just talking about washing your hands 25 times a day. And suddenly the masks came in and everyone stopped washing their hands.
Interesting. It sounds like you actually got a leg up on things during this time. You discovered new things and there were silver linings for you.
Yeah, there were. I mean, it was, at the time, I had 2 of my children not living in the same state, and so didn't get to see them for quite an extended period of time. So that was part of it, quite challenging. The isolation of where we were meant that at certain times the rest of Australia just moved ahead and we sort of stayed behind. But I'm on a professional level much happier now. When I look at video footage of me from 2019 on stage, and then I look at video footage of me in 2023 on stage, it's a different person. There's much more empathy. There's a laugh. There's a lightness in my step. And that came from my learning journey over that time.
So for 30 plus years, you've been a serial entrepreneur, but I want to kind of boil down what you do a little bit to a more simpler point. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids at a career day, third graders, let's say. One of them looks up at you and asks, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
I say that I help people be the best they can be. In simple terms, in more adult terminology, I help people become more excellent, which is showing up as the best version of themselves every day. And how do I do that? It's somewhat on personal level, somewhat on a business level, and more recently on, embracing technologies like artificial intelligence. So depending on who the client is that I'm working with, a lot of the work I do is around leadership, culture, strategy, working on those three areas to create excellence, because that's my belief, is that excellent businesses exhibit strength in those three areas: leadership, culture, and strategy. And so that's probably 50% of my life. And the other 50% is running a financial services group with it's somewhere north of 3 billion in mortgages that we've settled over the time I've owned it.
So when you were in the third grade, or you were younger in grade school, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Probably from my early teens, I knew that I never wanted to work in a corporation. I have no idea why. I read a book when I was probably just finished high school called The Peter Principle, and I actually won a competition at Toastmasters based on that book. And the Peter Principle said that in any organization, everybody will rise to their level of incompetence. And I've always been amused by that statement. But I, for some reason, just grew up with this idea that I always wanted to be my own boss. Started my first businesses when I was 13 or 14. I had to financially do that. But it's just always been this obsession with I can do it. And that's probably got me into more trouble and over my life as well. This absolute belief in self that says I can do it. And suddenly when imposter syndrome kicks in, like it does with all of us, and I go, where the hell did that come from? Because I'm this absolutely focused person who says I can do it.
So let's go back to the beginnings of your life and kind of get a better idea of how you became who you are today. Talk to me a little bit about your childhood and how some of these seeds got into you to want to be into business and to help other people. You obviously have a lot of energy for other people and give a lot. How did all of those seeds begin and grow into who you are today?
Well, I guess I grew up with, parents, and my father died in 1999, but, parents who were always involved in some level of community organization. And I grew up with that. And even at school level, I was involved in community groups. I remember in my final year at school, one of the teachers said to me, what are you going to do now that school's finished? You've got nothing to be involved with. So that didn't stop the rest of my life. So I guess I was this kid at school who was a little bit probably ADHD as they diagnosed me today. Probably a little unfocused, but reasonably clever in that I could get away with getting good marks and a little bit of work. I studied engineering for my sins. And again, I say to people today, I got to third year engineering and I did not yet understand what an engineer did. Bizarrely, I just finished my undergraduate degree, went to work as an engineer in the mines. And again, did not understand, worked 6,000 foot underground. We have deep level mines in South Africa where I grew up. But, jumping through those hoops, I then went off and did a master's in engineering and software engineering. Was one of the first software engineers at the time, doing things like object-oriented programming without being too technical. Also did an MBA. And in 1990, I started my first real business. I mean, I'd had other businesses in between, ran a mobile discotheque, doing parties and all sorts of things. But my first real business started in 1990 when my partner and I started an education business aimed primarily at the students. So 1990 was significant in South Africa because that was when Nelson Mandela was released. And there was suddenly this big hunger for education amongst the previously disenfranchised and disadvantaged community. And we didn't capitalize on that. We actually didn't know what we were doing. And I think that's part of one of my life philosophies as well. We just started this business, started an education business, and we were in the right place at the right time. 20 students in 1990, 4,000 students and 6 campuses by 1996. So, and then we reverse listed that into a listed shell. And I moved on, went into venture capital for 5 years. It was at the time of the start of the tech boom. So my skills in software engineering were quite important, and I was having a lot of fun in the venture capital space. I moved to Australia, joined another tech fund for 2 years. But after 2 years of working for somebody else, I needed to be my own boss. And so in 2001, went out on my own with no real plan, ended up starting a financial services group that I still own today that has 3 billion plus in mortgage settlements. But 10 years ago, in fact, this April 2013, I was training for a marathon after a season of triathlons. And it was discovered that I had 2 blocked arteries and I needed 2 stents. And so 10 years to the month, I had 2 stents, and that focused me on being who I am today, which is sharing my experiences with the world and serving the world in a different way, serving business to make them more excellent. And so the last 10 years have seen the evolution of the excellence guy from the, I guess, shock at age 49 of facing my own mortality.
So one of the things that fuels us are those that we admire and look up to. Who's been a hero for you or a role model?
You know what? Interestingly, I mean, at times, very different people. So Richard Branson, Elon Musk. But at different spaces, I'm a firm believer in, like, I have had mentors, but only in my 50s have I actually admitted that they were my mentors. But often you have to actually accept that a person or a person in your life or an experience or somebody you look up to may only give you something, at one point. You can't really focus your whole life on following them. And so, there were times I was inspired by Richard Branson, after he published, do it, screw it, let's do it. Elon Musk, the most amazing. I met Elon, many, many years ago before he was famous and super billionaire, growing up in South Africa. But, there were, at times, different people have done different things. I have in the speaking industry, the most amazing mentors around the world. And they're not always my mentor, but they've taught me things and made me grow up and mature. That in my late 50s, I can say, yep, I think I'm starting to grow up. And so, some of them are people who, like my mentor and partner on my own podcast, who has one of the highest civilian medals in Australia for services to the global speaking community. So, as a person who gives of himself and has given for 20 plus years, he inspires me to give more. And that's what I do in our global speaking community. So, there's many of those people that are different. And then there's authors and, fellow speakers that I'll go, wow, that person's brilliant on stage. What can I learn from them? And how can I make myself better?
So if you can meet one person alive on the planet right now and spend a little time with them, who would it be?
It would actually have to be Nelson Mandela, who's obviously not alive anymore. Just because I think Nelson Mandela had the most amazing quality of forgiveness, that after 27 years of internment, I nearly said internship, internment in jail, breaking rocks with a sledgehammer, real hard labor for many, many years, he actually emerged from jail and was prepared to forgive and spoke of the concept of loving people, not hating people, and that love and hate are the same emotion. So why don't we just apply more to love? I think as a person, I think he's amazing. I mean, I think Tony Robbins has built an amazing business. I would love to spend some time with Tony Robbins, not because I need any motivation. I mean, I think he's a brilliant motivator, but I want to understand what he did to build the Tony Robbins group to what he did. So it's a different level. I'm absolutely motivated to jump out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning and exercise and put in, lots of hours doing lots of things. But there are people like that I'd love to understand how they thought about their business, because that's what really makes me interested.
Speaking of, you talk about motivation and the things that you've done in your life up to this point. Let's just say that tonight you have a dream and you run into the 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that younger version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom that you've gained in your life and the life that you've led. What advice would you give your younger self?
I actually would probably give my younger self the words I used in the opening chapter of my book called Dive In, where I said that I was 55 at the time, but I said, in my 55 years, I've sometimes mixed up confidence, overconfidence, and arrogance. And I'm starting to learn the difference. And I think I would be telling my 20-year-old self to tone down the arrogance. And that there's nothing wrong with confidence, even overconfidence. But when you step over the line to arrogance, you annoy a lot of people. And I've probably done that equally in my life.
So of all of the things that you've accomplished in your life, all the places you've been and the wonderful things that have happened, what are you the proudest of?
My 3 children, because all 3 of them are in their own way, living in different cities in the world, which makes for an interesting family dynamic. But my 3 children are all out there as amazing human beings, committed to trying to save the planet, or save the planet from itself, or save people from itself, and just add their own contribution to the world. And I think I look at them and, academically, I have 2 master's degrees, and I'm really proud of the fact that my 2 older kids both got master's degrees in the last year. Not because of the fact that they got a master's degree, but because they were committed enough to expand and extend themselves to be better. And I think but just being with them and seeing when we have a family gathering and the level of speaking between them and their understanding of the world, I don't think I had that level of understanding in my 20s.
Of all of the clients that you've had and all of the business dealings that you've had, what's been the best client response, fan letter, so to speak, that you've ever gotten back from the work you've done?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. So they're different. I mean, the one was my very, very first professional speaking engagement, and a testimonial I received that basically said, "Wow, Rael's changed my life." And obviously that one kind of sticks with me for a long time. But one of the things I teach people when I talk about sales and marketing and running businesses, particularly in the consumer space, is to be cognizant of people and try and remember things about people. I know that's hard. A lot of people say to me they can't remember what they had for breakfast, never mind who they spoke to yesterday. Well, I actually have this almost, I'd say, weird ability to remember weird things about people. And so I have in my mortgage space 14,500 personal clients, and that I've dealt with over the 20 odd years that we've been doing the business. And a client called me this week, actually, and said, "I'm sure you don't remember me," was how the conversation started. He said, "I'm sure you don't remember me because we haven't spoken since 2014. And I just wanted to get some advice from you." And I said, and this was a random call. It wasn't a call that I could prepare for, like a message where I was returning his call. He had just called through to the office. And I listened and I said, "I'm just trying to remember, but I think you met a new partner about 6 or 7 years ago, and you were getting married and moving to another country, and you were an engineer once," and I quoted which company I thought he worked for. And there was stunned silence on the phone. And he said, 90% of it was right. I worked for another company as engineer. But the fact that I could call those those facts that were broad enough but specific enough about him out of the back of my head. He's referred in those 2 weeks since I spoke to him another 3 clients. So I made the effort. I taught myself early on to be able to do that. And I get this, hey, wow reaction from lots and lots of people in that space. And that's a skill I try and teach entrepreneurs now, that you should always try and remember something about people. And when you talk to them or reference something, just do that. I mean, to me, that's the skill, and the fact that I get this amazing reaction from people when I do it. That's great. I mean, yes, I get, I do lots of talking and lots of strategy sessions for companies and communications and sales and leadership training, and I get great testimonials, but they're very few. And there's one other that I'd indulge you with. In 1994, my business partner and I employed a maid who cleaned the offices in which we ran our business. And in 1994, she came to us and said her son had just finished his final year at school. He didn't have a great schooling, but could we help him? And we owned an education business, so we said, sure, we'll give him a scholarship to come and study. That was in 1994. In 2017, I got this random message that I nearly never even read on LinkedIn from a guy whose name I didn't recognize, contacting me and thanking me and my business partner for giving him the scholarship because he had just been employed or appointed as the marketing director of a major corporate in South Africa. And for me, that taught me a whole lot about paying it forward, about doing the right thing, and really a tribute to myself and my partner at the time, who went, yeah, sure, we'll give you an opportunity.
That's wonderful. So let's get to the exact essence of you. Everyone out there has a perception of you, your family, friends, clients, colleagues, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
It changes weekly and daily, but I think I am this person who has this understanding of business at a small and medium business level. I'm not a major corporate person. I am a small, medium business specialist, that I can work with people and understand their business and ask the really tricky questions. That's who I see myself as. I love other people's success. I met with some people today about something, and he was telling me how well he was doing. I said, that's fantastic. And he said, most people look at me strangely when I talk about how well I've done. And I went, no, I love it that you're successful. I don't care whether you're more successful than me, whether your business is bigger. I love success, and I love the stories behind it. And it is those stories that I have the ability to translate for other businesses and say, look, this business has done it this way, but, potentially carries away. You can use the same idea in your business. And so that's who I am. I'm that person who can synthesize vast quantities of information about weirdly different things. There was a technique that I used to talk about, 30 odd years ago, called functional benchmarking, and came out of Harvard Business School and was quite academic. But essentially it said, don't try and model your business on your nearest competitor who may or may not be more successful, but break your business down into specific areas that you want to improve, and then model yourself on the best in that space. And an example they used to use 30 years ago was, if you wanted the best billing system at the time for your business, well, one of the best in the world at that time was American Express. So go and model your business billing on how American Express does it. And that's the ability that I bring to clients, is that ability to take the knowledge from, The people who started making from Nespresso, when they started making Nespresso capsules, and apply that to somebody who's, got a printing business. How? Because a particular aspect of Nespresso's business at the time applies to their printing business now. And how can we synthesize that together?
That's brilliant. So if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, get involved with anything business-wise, where's the best place on the web for them to go?
Raelbricker.com, RaelBricker.com. And for your listeners who are listening, they can go to raelbricker.com/free book, and they can get a free copy of Dive In, Lessons Learned Since Business School, the first 33 years since business school and what I've learned since I left the business school.
Wonderful. Hey, Rael, this has been great. I really appreciate you opening up your story. Best of luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.